You are listening to Squid and the Ultimate Leafs Fan.
Hello, Canada and hockey fans of the United States and Newfoundland, and an extra big hello to Canadian servicemen overseas.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Squid and the Ultimate Leafs Fan. I'm Mike Wilson, the Ultimate Leafs Fan, and joining me as always, my winger, Ricky Squid Bive. Squid, how are we keeping?
We're doing pretty good, Mike, considering it's pretty darn cold up here right now. It's about -8, I believe. Yeah, don't feel sorry for us or anything, but
it's not that good, I can tell you that.
Just doing the same old thing and watching a few series here and there, going for a walk every day, and that's pretty much it.
Well, we have this. We have this to talk about every week. Today, we're joined by another popular Leaf alumni, somebody that you know very well. You've done a lot of work with for the alumni and for this organization, and also played against Mr. Shayne Corson. We're referring to.
Yeah, Shayne's a good guy, and I went on a few trips with him, like to Montreal and Ottawa, and I think Florida one time, and with some of the corporate partners. And I don't know if you can get a more fun guy to hang out with than Shayne until a certain point, and then I got to leave. It's time to get out of there.
Well, I saw him on a few of the excursions over the years at some of the boondoggles, and he's very popular because he tells the stories. And he's not sure to scare a pint with the customers and the clients also.
No,
they love him.
They certainly do. And but he is a great guy and a lot of fun to be around.
Well, on a more serious note, the hockey world lost one of the all-time greats, and in Toronto's case, its longest-serving captain, who we both had the pleasure of spending some time with. I'm, of course, referring to Mr. George Armstrong.
Yeah, George was a great man, really. I mean, I don't know if there's any other word you could use, because he was humble. He was very generous with his time. He didn't necessarily love to speak, but when he did, it was, it was meaningful and a lot of times hilarious at the same time. But my biggest remembrance of Chief was when him and Johnny Bauer came to visit me in PEI after the Marlies drafted me, and I believe it was 76, I think it was. And they came down to PEI to try to talk me into go play for the Marlies as opposed to going to Sherbrooke, who drafted me in the Quebec League. And, that was something that I just will never forget forever. Johnny Bauer and George Armstrong, I'm like, okay, you're 17 years old and these guys are coming and walking into your house. It's like an unbelievable thing.
That's all. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, that would spin ahead, but I did do it obviously a good enough job because you ended up going to Sherbrooke. So we got to get the full marks on that one for trying, but they didn't close the job.
They did a good job. I just decided that I would rather go to a smaller place. Plus, I was the first pick by Sherbrooke in the first round, 4th overall, and I was the 3rd or 4th pick by the Marlies. So, when you look at everything, I think it just came down to playing in a smaller community and also being picked higher, which likely gives you more of a better chance of staying there and playing a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, well, he visited the room 4 times, and a couple of my memories that stand out, there was numerous, but a couple was the first time he showed up, he came to the door and he came with his family. Deb opened the door and he greeted George, his 2 boys, Brian and Fred. A couple of the grandchildren were with him. And he'd alerted to us that he wasn't going to be very much company or good company because he didn't like to speak. And we had said, well, that's not the idea of this. You just come with your family, enjoy the room, and you guys just take it all in as best you can. Well, he walked through the threshold of the front door and didn't stop talking for 2.5 hours, telling me everything from all the inventions that Bobby Naylor invented to George Imlach. He talked about Turk Broda. He talked about all these inventions, all the players and some of the tricks he played on guys, and he just didn't stop. And we finally almost had to throw him out to go home because it was getting late. And the second memory is a little more recent. Was in with when we held a number of reunions for the Marlies, and two in particular, the 73 and 75 World Cup championship teams. In 73, most of the teams showed up at our place, and George came. So I was moderating a talk at the front where the players are coming up and speaking and saying their piece. And guys like Mike Palmetier, he doesn't speak in public. Like, he's very shy, and when he didn't say anything, and a couple other guys didn't say anything. So I got to the end, and there was George sitting there, and I thought, well, out of courtesy, I better say something to him. And I asked, would the coach like to come up and speak, figuring he would say no. He gets up, marches right to the front, and he gave about a couple minute speech to all the guys. And the thing that stuck out, Rick, is that the room just went deadly silent. And these players, and here they're all grown men now in their 40s, 50s, and 50s and 60s. And these guys were hanging on every word. And the admiration and respect they had for this man was just oozing out of the room. And it was just an unbelievable experience to look at these guys' faces looking at him. And for those out there, viewers, I actually had that recorded. I wasn't going to play it. I was going to keep it as a private piece. And then what happened with George this week, we decided, Deb and I, we've put it out it's out on Facebook and Twitter. So if you go to the Ultimate Leaf fan site, you can actually see that speech. And I know I sent it to Bruce Boudreau and Mike Palmetier, and they're both overcome with emotions looking at that speech. And I sent it to a couple of other players, and they've thanked me endlessly for sending it.
Well, George, I think in that particular instance, first of all, he was probably tickled pink that you invited him down there to see everything, and just started telling stories. And then, of course, standing up in front of guys that he coached, I think he felt a little bit probably more comfortable in a small little setting like that. But George wasn't one to stand up and give big speeches in front of crowds. I can assure you of that. And but if you got him alone or with a few people, boy, yeah, he could tell you some real good funny stories.
He was a character, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, he's going to be dearly missed, and the Leafs are playing a great tribute to him. I love that crest they put on the sort of night they have, and I think that's just phenomenal. And speaking of our guys, we're a couple hours away from them playing the first of two against Edmonton this week. The team sits 6-2 going into tonight. There's been some stretches of great execution. The first period during the night in Calgary is probably the best they've played this year to date. There's still those little stumbling moments they had throughout the game, but as that old crazy cliche goes, they're bending, but they're not breaking.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you're 6-2
so far
after 8 games, I mean, that's pretty darn good.
Yes.
They may have, I know it's early and there's 48 games left to go, whatever it is. Yeah. But I think these 2 games are very, very important for them to continue to roll like they are. You don't want to go into Edmonton and lose 2 games or something like that, and then all of a sudden you're 6-4 and you got to get back on the winning track. So I think these are pretty important games, and hopefully they don't go in there taking them lightly because they beat them once already.
Once, 1-1.
And 1-1, and hopefully they don't take them too lightly because these are important games. We always talked about that. Even if you win the first 10 of the year, those are just as important as the last 10 in the regular season. So, because they all count for 2 points.
And you see everybody, and right to your point, sorry to cut you off, is the fact that nobody wants these to go into extra time for that extra point. That's how tight everybody thinks it's going to be down the stretch.
Well, and that's the thing. When now, we wanted that 17th Canadian division, but now all of a sudden it's like, well, wait a minute. Okay, what about when Calgary and Edmonton are playing and whoever? There's always those 3-point games, and you're right. You don't want a whole lot of those going on.
No. Well, anyway, we'll be watching obviously with interest, and we shouldn't be complaining. Only in Toronto could a team be 6-2 after 8 games and still have some doubts about the team. So, things are going along as normal. So there we are.
Well, I think the one thing, sorry, Mike,
no, go.
I liked was the changes they made in the last game, bringing 2 or 3, 4. I know they have some injuries, but they took a couple of guys out, brought in. Who was it, Anderson and or Brooks and Boyd. And they both scored, and they certainly didn't look out of place. So maybe that's where this is all going to come together, is the depth that they have.
Well, that's the thing I was going to point out is, I mean, the depth is certainly going to be challenged as we go throughout all this season and back to back, well, not back to back, but playing basically every other night. And one thing no one can ever accuse Cal Dubas of is not being prepared for situations like this in his tenure so far as running the Maple Leafs. So they're getting guys in the game so far, and it seems to be paying out, and we'll see how it all goes. So just a couple of our fun fact part of the show here, just a couple of little things. And I know I got you in this one a couple of weeks ago, but on this day in 1932, Toronto again scored 3 goals in overtime to win a game. And I know everybody's going to ask the question is, when did that all stop? Because they played a 10-minute overtime and they could score as many times as they wanted. 1942, by the way, is when they stopped that. It was actually to do with a lot of the war stuff and time limitations. So that's when they cut that out and they stopped it after that year. But there they had 3 goals and they won that game that night and they beat the Rangers 6-3. Also on this day, for Leafs that can remember back in that time, or people remember 1934, also we had Eddie Shore returned after 16-game suspension for his violent hit on Ace Bailey that destroyed his career and ruined his career and almost killed him. And he came back after 16-game suspension. But the interesting part about that, it was the 15,000 people, largest crowd to see a game that year in Boston. So they love the guy, but he certainly wasn't well received in Toronto. And really, if you look at the way they play today, there's not much change, and that rivalry hasn't lost any of its sort of luster. And I'll leave this last one with you that seems to be very prevalent in a lot of other sports, and let's talk about this. This day in 1946, the NHL president Dutton, he actually suspended Babe Pratt from the Maple Leafs for betting on hockey games. And he never bet on his own team, he said, but he was suspended for betting on games. And it goes way back, and it's never going to change. And now it's part of the game. And I heard somebody talking about the other day, this could be one of the issues that going forward is it's getting more and more. But anyway, I leave that with you. So
wow, I didn't know
on
that.
all of that, yeah.
Didn't know that.
And yeah, that's true. Well, there's, Pete Rose, and look what the NFL guys, Alex Karras and these guys from going way back. And yes, this was an issue at the time. And, he bet on the games, but he says he never bet on his own team. So anyway, that's it. And I think we should now probably turn it over to our guest. So let's go and listen to see what Shayne has to say. Okay, Squid, our guest today enjoyed 19 years in National Hockey League after a distinguished junior career, represented Canada at the World Juniors, Pros, Olympics. And one of those guys teams just hated to play against. You know that firsthand. And the guy I'm referring to is a good friend of ours, Shayne Corson. Shayne, how are we doing?
Doing great. Thanks. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Good to have you. Now, listen, first off, a couple of things we want to talk about on a serious note right off the bat is, first off, the hockey world. Rick and I talked about at the beginning of the show is with the loss of George Armstrong. I'm sure you've had some doings with him over the years working with the Maple Leafs, and just if you'd like to say something.
Yeah, well, it was a sad day when we found out that Mr. Armstrong had passed away. He's just most importantly, just a great person, as Ricky and you know, he's just a super person, but he was a great leader on and off the ice. And I was just an honor to be able to get to know him a bit and to be able to talk to him and get some advice from him over the times that I met him. So just an icon in the city of Toronto and the Toronto Maple Leaf organization. Just like I said, it's just an honor for me to be able to have the opportunity to meet him and to be around him a little bit. He was just a class human being, another John Belleville like in Montreal. So two guys that were amazing and great leaders.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's well said, Shayne. And that seems to be the common theme when you hear anybody talk about George these days. And just on another note, I mean, today is a very special day for a lot of people, and it's a subject that people we have to really talk more about, and it's Bell's Let's Talk Day.
Yeah.
Now, you've had some issues, and it's a subject that's very close to you, and we'd just like to turn the floor over to you and let you say a few words.
Yeah, well, it is it's near and dear to my heart. I've suffered with anxiety and panic attacks since from being a young kid, and I didn't really actually deal with it in the proper ways. I just tried to deal with it by drinking and taking medication on my own and medicating myself. And finally, when I got done playing my career, I actually left the Maple Leafs in the playoffs during the 1 year in the playoffs. And I knew that I needed to get the help that I needed, or I wouldn't be around right now. I wouldn't be doing this podcast with you. So it's near and dear to my heart. I mean, lots of people suffer with it. Everybody, it touches everybody's lives. I mean, I know so many people that it's touched, and it doesn't matter if you're young, or you're older, or you're a boy, or a girl, or anything. It's pretty tough thing to deal with. I mean, I know Rick went through it too on his own. He didn't have it diagnosed, and he didn't even tell anybody about it really until he was done playing his career, quite after his career. So for me, it's just these types of podcasts and interviews and articles are ways for me to give back and to try to tell my story, so that if I can help one person, it's well worth it. And that's why I do these things. And I talk about my situation because it can touch anybody. It doesn't matter who you are. You could look good from the outside, but there's a lot of stuff going on the inside. So I try to use these types of platforms, and that's why I appreciate you guys giving me this to tell my story. And if I can help somebody, then it's well worth it for me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Shayne. It's, and I think the times now that we're in, it was a little bit different in the 80s, obviously.
Yeah,
you were considered weak and whatever if you did that. But today it's different. And people, there is people there for people to reach out to and get help. And so it's all about kind of not being afraid to admit that you have, like I said, it's like having a cancer. It's no different.
Yep.
It's an illness that you can't really deal with on a day-to-day basis. So you get treated for cancer, but you're not going to get treated for mental illness because you're afraid that people are going to think you're weak. I think that pretty much says it all about people should not be afraid to talk about it.
100%. I mean, you said it, it's not a weakness, it's an illness. And that's one of the sayings I've always stuck to. And it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to be down. It's okay to have different emotions, but you just have to be able to deal with them and find the tools that you can use to deal with those issues. But you nailed it, Ricky. The biggest and most important thing is to first admit that you need help, and then to go get the proper help. And everybody's help is different. It just depends on the person, who you feel comfortable with, and what you need to get better. And you said it. It's all about reaching out to somebody, and that's a nice thing. Things have changed since you came into the league. You were in the league before me, and I remember watching you play and loved the Leafs and loved watching you play. And then it changed a bit more when I got into it, but it was still, you were considered, you're supposed to be this big, tough hockey player, and we were a little bit afraid. And not only that, Ricky, as well as I do, we were afraid to say anything about any injuries, even not just mental illness or injuries, because you didn't want to lose your job. Back then, they would just send you to the minors and say, well, we'll get the next guy in line. So it was a little tougher, but nowadays for sure, there's places that you can turn to. And just by today, you see all the different messaging going out there on social media and stuff, that there is a lot more areas to turn to, and the support. That's another huge thing when you suffer with this. And I was lucky to have, my mom and my sisters and my own family, my wife and my kids and all that. And I had the Leaf organization and the doctors that went with that, and the NHLPA, the doc there, he was just amazing with me. So I had a lot of support, and that's very important when you're dealing with this stuff too, as you know.
Well, I think that the thing is, if I can throw my couple cents in, is the fact that people have to realize that just because you guys have touched on, just because somebody's a professional athlete and playing at an elite level of sport, doesn't mean they can't have everyday problems that we all experience every day. And I think this is the message by guys like you and Ricky speaking up. This is really becoming evident, and people are starting to really realize this. I know that Deb and I hosted a couple of years ago with Mike Babcock and Michael Landsberg, a 6-out week to help him start his charity foundation for anxiety. Yep. And it's really funny. Mike, I've known for a number of years. And when we were planning the event to show everybody what the state that this can get to, he came over to our house for a meeting. You guys, our place. So he came over. It took him, and there's only me and Debbie there. It took him 2 weeks to get the strength to leave his house to drive to our place with his issue. And this is a guy who's on TV, loud and screaming and boisterous, and he's just looks like he's the most outspoken guy in the world. And he took that long to get the strength to leave his house. And I know when Mike Babcock came and started speaking in front of the room, we had a lot of guys in Bay Street there. He actually couldn't get through speaking the impact it had on his family and some of his friends. And it really hit home. And I think that this is a really good forum, and I'm glad that, you guys are stepping up and listen. Anything we can do, always to help.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And funny you tell that story. I didn't leave my house for 2 weeks one time, and I have ulcerative colitis too. So what we decided with the organization, the Leaf organization, and myself, that we were going to say I was having a colitis flare up, but it was actually, I couldn't leave my house for 2 weeks. And I mean, it could get to a dark place. I was in a very dark place at the end of it, and that's why I knew that I had to leave the Leafs and leave the game I love playing. That was the most important thing. One of the most important things in my life was playing hockey and being a part of a hockey team. But I knew that if I didn't do that, that I wasn't going to be, like I said, I wouldn't be around right now. I wouldn't be doing this podcast and doing the things that I'm doing now. So, yeah, it's a very tough, difficult thing to talk about, but I think it's important that we talk about it as much as possible. And it's probably the most difficult thing I've ever been through, but luckily I had the support and the people I could turn to get the help.
Rick, final comment?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, there is help out there for everybody. If you need it, don't be afraid. I played 13 years in the best hockey league in the world, and I wasn't diagnosed with it. They missed it. And then 15 years later, after I started my career, I get into coaching, and then it just hit me. And it can be crippling. There's no question.
Well, go ahead, Shayne.
I love that point that Ricky said, and you got to remember that you're not alone. There's so many people. When I came out with my story, there were so many people that reached out to me, and people that I had no idea were going through the same thing I was going through. And people can hide it really well, but there's so much good messaging being sent today, and it's like that's another one. Like, not be afraid to reach out, but you're not alone either. There's a lot of people there, and you're going to be supported. There's places that you can turn for the help. So don't think you're alone, because you're not. Because when the darkest days, I always felt like I was on my own. I couldn't do it. I had to do this on my own. But no, you can't do it on your own. You need the help, and you're not alone. That's so important.
Well, Clint Malarchuk was on a couple of weeks ago with us, and he talked about it. And he talked about the site, and he has people that can contact him.
Yeah.
And he said to our audience that you'd be amazed at the players that reached out to him, that wanted some help and wanted some direction, that people would be just absolutely flabbergasted who need help and who are looking for help.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I was shocked that there's professional ball players who reached out to me. I don't want to say names because it's never given me the right to say it. But I mean, he was one of the best, and he reached out to me. I talked to him for 2 years over the phone. Never met him in person, but I talked to him when he was having panic attacks and anxiety attacks. And I mean, Kenny Reed, who we've done a bunch of these things for. You, like another guy you see on TV, you'd never imagine. He's outspoken, funny, loves being on TV in front of the camera, and he suffers with anxiety and panic attacks. So yeah, it can affect anybody, and it's not always, you don't judge a book by its cover always. You got to see what's inside sometimes.
Well, the best part about this is we talk about it. It is now not a hidden and sort of put away in the back closet for people. Now it's out and people talk about it. And I think the more we talk about it, more can be accomplished. And I think moving forward, and I think this is a really good thing. And I love what Bell's doing, and the fact that people are reaching out and trying to help people. So I think that's fantastic. So all the best. And we, certainly want to, journey along with you, and we'll help any way we can, as we say, going forward. Now, on a lighter note, we'd like to get into some of what got us here today. And I do know that I ran into a number of times on my excursion when I followed the Leafs in the 2018-19 season. I can tell you this, Shayne, that as ambassador for the Maple Leafs, you are absolutely one of the best. I can tell you, I've run into him in the box or out somewhere with the fans, the people who are going on these trips, the smiles on these people's faces that you were engaged with. And there's Rick. He's dying to tell the story. I know he is. Anybody gets a chance to go on a trip with this guy, don't turn it down. And his winger, by the way, is just as funny, Darcy Tucker.
Yeah. You know what? I mean, I love doing the alumni trips. I love getting engaged with the fans. And like I said, I like them to get the opportunity to meet us as just people. That's what we are. We're just people that we're lucky to play a sport we love to play. And I really enjoy it. And I genuinely enjoy it. I mean, so does Ricky. And like Ricky, I've seen some of Ricky's posts, how he says he's missing, and the other side of it is not just the fans. Like the fans are the most important thing to all of us alumni guys. And we realize that, and you realize it even more after you're done playing. But yeah, it was just incredible. But for me, it's also getting to hang out with some of the ex-players and some of the players that I love watching growing up and playing against. And for me, I miss that side of it. I've had a lot of fun with the guys, got to go to know a lot of guys a lot better than I did before I started doing the alumni stuff. And, Rick being one, I'm not just saying that he's on the podcast and it's his podcast with you, but I looked up to Ricky always as a player and as a person. I met him a long time ago when I was just a 17-year-old kid. I met him out east at a golf tournament, and I'll never forget that. And he was always super nice to me right from day one. So I love getting to hang out with him. I got to know Ally Frady, who I never played with, but has become a really close friend of mine. So being in with the fans, I love it. I mean, we appreciate it. They did so much for us, gave us the energy, and were there for us, and gave us the ability to play a game we love to play. Because if it weren't for the fans, we wouldn't get paid and be able to do what we did and things like that. So for us to be able to get back to the fans and tell some stories and have some fun, I guess. Hey, Ricky, maybe not. I have maybe a little extra fun, but whatever. It's enjoyable for me. I enjoy having it, and I love being with the guys.
As I said to Mike, I said that we've been together a number of times on the road with whether it be the corporate partners or the alumni going to play games and stuff like that. And I hang in there for a little while, but at some point I have to leave. and I find it very ironic. You know, you talked about Ally Frady, and Al's a great guy and a good friend of mine. And every time the Molson guys go on road trips, it's always you and Al that go with those guys. I'm shocked.
Yeah, I'm not shocked.
Neither are the Molson guys or the fans.
Oh, I know they're not.
Well, let's
it's
go
been well documented. I like to have fun, guys. It's been well documented. I like to have a good
well,
time.
it's okay. You know,
we all do.
That's a good thing.
We all like to have fun. And now I have just as much fun hanging out with you guys, even though I don't drink. And I'm watching, you know, other guys having a few and so on. But it doesn't bother me. And I get involved in the laughs and the fun and the good times that we have together. And the best part about it is that a lot of us never played with each other, but yet you get us all together and we're all pretty much the same. Like, we just love to have fun and go on the ice and play and entertain the fans. And or if you're on a trip with people, I always go out with them after the game, and so a lot of times they're shocked to realize that I don't drink when they go to order and everything. But God, I have a lot of fun with them. So anyway,
it's amazing, Ricky. And that's something that I have a lot of respect for you too. Is you decide to do something for yourself and for you, and not to drink. But you're still there, like you said. You're still out there with us, having fun, joking, having a great time, and you hang in there with us. I know you can't keep up with me and Big Al till the hours that we go to bed, but I don't blame you. Not many guys can, whether you drink it or not. But that's why I have so much respect for you. There are guys that, you know, they don't drink, but they come in and they put their, you know, the minimal time in, and then they're gone. But you're there and you hang in there till the end, and that's something I respect you for, and I respect you for not drinking too. I mean, I think that takes a lot of strength, and you've showed a lot of strength, and that's why you were a captain and a leader, and that's what you do. And we look up to you as younger players. I'm not saying I'm not much younger than you, but as younger players, we look up to people like you. And when we see you do the types of things you're doing, it motivates us and gives us a lot of belief too that we can do whatever we want to do too.
And that's what the name of the game is it's, you know, that's what everybody always has to remember too. And I get asked that question all the time when guys used to come and visit the room, and I'd say, you know, what you have to understand is these guys were kids too. Yeah. They all had their guys. They all scored the winning goal in the Stanley Cup final on the street or in the basement or out at the schoolyard. They all had their guys they all looked up to. We're all the same. The only thing is, when we all played the game, these guys just play a lot better than all of us. So we're watching them. So that's the difference. So speaking of which, Shayne, let's get into a little bit of your career. And you were taken 8th overall by Montreal in 1984. You're a highly touted junior coming out.
Yep.
So going to Montreal, what was your mindset going there? And actually, going through your mind, when did you really think you could actually play the game for a living? Or did you?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, to get drafted by anybody, it was like a dream come true for me. I didn't really care where I was drafted to, which team or which organization, but you know, luckily for me, I was drafted by one of the best sports organizations, never mind hockey organizations. And the funny thing is, growing up though, we were Leaf fans. My dad and I, my mom and my sister. I was born and raised in Barrie, so we loved the Leafs. Yeah, and we hated the Habs. I'm not going to lie to you, but then when I got drafted, I had met with them the night before. And funny thing is, I was ranked 5th, and they told me they're going to take me 5th, and then they brought Peter Svoboda out of Czech, and they had him hidden. They drafted him, and then they made a trade down there at the 8th spot and took me. But it was just a dream come true to be able to share that with my mom and dad that day at the Forum, and being drafted by the Canadians in the Forum was pretty special. So I was pretty excited, and like I said, it was a dream come true. But I knew I had still a long road ahead of me. The Montreal Canadiens are a storied organization, and they had a lot of great players. So I knew I had some work ahead of me. So I knew there was an opportunity there. It was just whether I wanted to put the hard work in, the time. And, luckily for me, after 3 years of junior hockey, I went into Montreal, and after the year they won the cup, I was actually supposed to go and play in the Stanley Cup finals with them after my junior season was over, but I got hurt, tore my knee and my ankle up. So I was in a cast. Back then they put you in a full cast. So I went and watched and was a part of it. So just being around the guys and learning how hard they work and to get to know them a bit, it made it a little bit easier for me to go in the following year. And, luckily and fortunate for me, they found a spot for me the following year. So even then, though, you're not sure, you could be there for a short period and be sent to the minors and then never come back from the minors. You just don't know. But I think I realized that I could have a long career after I was in the league for a couple of years, and had kind of established myself as the type of player I was going to be in the NHL. So, but back in those days, you never were sure of anything, really. It was always a battle. You're always fighting for your job. And that's something that I learned at a young age. But I enjoyed that side of it, and I enjoyed the competition side of it.
Now, going to Montreal, obviously they won a Stanley Cup. They're storied franchise, iconic franchise, one of the best in the world. We all know that. And so here you are, a young guy going in there. Now, we've been told on our podcast by guys who've gone through that organization that the veterans will look after players and young guys after time, but in Montreal, they seem to take a little extra care for the guys. Was that true when you went through there with some of the veterans looking after you?
Oh, man. Yeah, I'll tell you, I played in, like I said, I played in some all my organizations I played with there. We were treated with respect and treated fabulously, like Edmonton, Toronto, Montreal, St. Louis, Dallas. I can't say a bad thing about anything, but yes, in Montreal, the older players were incredible. We had Larry Robinson and Bob Gainey. Bob Gainey was our captain. Larry was one of our assistant captains. They were just really, really unreal to us, but it was not only those guys, it was the Bellevaux, the Lafleurs was still there when I got there in training camp. Yvon Cornwallier, Stuart Savard was our GM. We just had the Richard brothers. They were around all the time. Like, that's one thing with the Montreal Canadiens. They had those guys in our dressing room all the time. And we were feeding off them, and we loved hearing their stories and listening to them. And they were just amazing. And they didn't say it was all about work. They wanted you to go out and have fun, but come to the rink the next day and work hard. So, I fit right in with them really well, to be just having those types of names and people around us, they were just, they took care of us. And they were just incredible. And they treated us like we were been there forever. It was my first day. I remember walking in the room. Go ahead, Ricky.
It's funny you mention that, because I learned a lot during the World Juniors. The first year they ever picked an all-star team, and it was in Montreal. So what they did was they took everything out of the Montreal Canadiens weight room and put it in stalls. So that's where we dressed. Yeah. We showered in their showers. We walked around their room, looked at the plaques on the wall and everything. But more important than that, we got to watch them practice every day. And you're right. Wow. Those guys may have gone out and had fun the night before, but boy, they worked their tails off every single day of practice. Their practices were so quick paced, it was unbelievable. And I learned a lot from watching, and realizing what it's going to take to get to that level.
Yeah, that's what they taught me. Then they taught me how to, be with the fans. Like, they were so incredible with the fans. I never seen one of those guys walk away from a fan and not sign an autograph. They were incredible, from Guy Lafleur all the way down to Jean Beliveau. Mr. Beliveau was incredible. Bob Gainey, Larry Robinson. Jacques Lemaire was there when I got there in training camp as a coach. Unbelievable coach, ran an unbelievable practice. I could go on. Yvon Lambert's there, Réjean Houle's there. They got them all. They're all there, and they were in the rink all the time just for us to go and ask advice. Why wouldn't you want to ask one of those guys for some advice about how to live and how to play hockey, right? And it was just incredible. I learned so much from them. And you're right, though, Ricky, the practices, they ran great practices. They were a great offensive team in the 70s and the early 80s, but they worked on the defensive side of it just as hard as the offensive side of it. And it was that's something that I learned from them is, if you want to win championships, you got to be able to play in your own zone too. And that's something that, a lot of those guys and the guys that I played with, we sacrificed maybe a little bit of the offensive side of the game, but we we wanted to win and we wanted to sacrifice because we wanted to do the job in the defensive zone too. And that's something like guys like Jacques Lemaire and Bob Gainey and all those guys taught us from a young age. So, I mean, and Larry Robinson was just one of the most incredible people. And they had different personalities too. Like Bob was more of a straight, even keel tone type of guy and never got up or down too much. And then there was Larry, was more emotional, up and down. And we just had different types of people around us, but it all seemed to fit real well. So yeah, it was a great organization to be a part of. And I owe a lot to them. They gave me the opportunity to play in the league and they treated me incredibly well. And I'm still friends with all of them and still can call them at any time for advice. And, now that I came to Toronto after and, doing all the alumni stuff, I got to, know a lot of the guys that I looked up to as a kid playing, growing up in Barrie and playing in Barrie. And I got to hang out with them and get to know them a bit and feed off them too. So I learned from a lot of the best guys and most importantly, off the ice, the way they are with the people and the fans is something that I learned from all those guys, the Habs and the Leaf guys.
Well, you touched on it with Montreal and the city embracing you and taking you in as one of them.
Yeah.
And that they really do that is it we've been keep hearing all the time. So a couple of years later, you all of a sudden the dreaded words that every player hates to hear.
Yeah.
It's not if you're around.
Yeah.
It's you've been traded. And those aren't exactly the words I want to say. And you end up in Edmonton for Vincent Danfus.
Yeah.
How did that all come about? And would that catch you off guard or how'd that whole day unfold for you?
First of all, I wanted to just go back a bit, but the funniest, who gave us the hardest time as rookies in Montreal? Was Red Fisher, was one of the writers in Montreal. He would give the young guys, he wouldn't talk to the young guys for their first rookie year, but for some reason he loved Chelios and he loved me. And so he was easy on me. He took it pretty easy on me my first year and he protected us a lot. Actually, he was really good to us, but yeah, I wasn't totally, I was kind of caught off guard, but I wasn't totally caught off guard, to be honest. I mean, it's well known that I got into a little bit of trouble when I played in Montreal. And I didn't want to say no to getting into a couple little bouts, like trying to stick up for my teammates or friends. But Vinny's a heck of a player too. Don't get me wrong. And Vinny Danfus a heck of a hockey player. And Pat Burns, who was a big supporter of mine and a big part of my career. And they had fired Pat. And I knew there was going to be changes made. Like Chelios had been traded. And a bunch of the guys had been traded already over the years. So it wasn't a total complete surprise, but it was still a surprise. I mean, anytime you get traded, I love playing in Montreal, love the Montreal Canadiens, love the city of Montreal, obviously loved it. It was a lot of fun on and off the ice, but that's what might've got me in a little bit of trouble. But anyways, we'll leave that alone. But yeah, it was a tough day. It was a tough day for me. And, but I knew there was going to be another, part of my life and another challenge and went to Edmonton and played there for 3 years and loved every minute playing Edmonton. The people and the fans embraced me there and loved my style of play. So it was a good time, but I'm not going to deny it was a tough day for me for sure being traded.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, a buddy of mine used to work for Nestle's back in the day and he went into Montreal, the organization, to make a promotional deal with them.
Yeah.
And one of the names they wanted to use was Chris Chelios. Yeah. So what's the idea? We want to put him on these drinking cups and they're going to sell them. And the guy said, well, unless you're going to put his face on a beer bottle, he's not going to do you any good.
They probably wanted to use an idea. They probably wanted to use both of us because we both we were in the crap box. Chelly and I were in the crap box, but they couldn't do anything with that. It was food. But yeah, I can see that being said with Chelly. He's a good buddy of mine still.
Ironically, I have my picture on a Molson beer can.
Yeah.
They came out the one year.
I don't.
6 of us. So it was myself, Daryl, Lanny, and Tiger, and Johnny Bauer.
Yeah.
There was 6 of us, and
that's cool.
Every case had one can with someone's picture on it. One of us, and I have one in the basement actually.
I think I actually drank a few of your cans. Ricky, I think I drank a few of your cans. I think I drank a few cases of your cans, buddy. Drinking a beer, nothing better. Drinking a beer and look at one of your idols, right? I love it.
That's actually perfect.
That's
now
perfect.
In Edmonton, Shayne, you're there, and George Burnett makes you captain.
Yeah.
Now, okay. Yep. Everybody's had their issues being captains and all that kind of stuff. Now, you though, following a legacy of captains, particularly one guy, his name kind of slips my mind right now. I think he wore number 99 or something like that. Yeah. So there's all that trailing you, or you're trailing that trailing you.
Yeah.
Like, how did that, like, did that pressure all just kind of get to you?
You know what? To be honest, it wasn't really pressure. Honestly, I didn't feel any pressure on it. Like, I think it was. I'm trying to remember if it was the team that picked it or it was Slats or how it worked. It might have been the team they voted, but there's always pressure. Ricky knows that. He was a captain of one of the greatest sports organizations, hockey organizations ever. Obviously, the Toronto Maple Leafs. So there's obviously there's a lot of pride. You take honor in it, and there obviously is somewhat pressure, but it wasn't really the pressure thing. I just think that George and my personalities didn't really hit it off that well, putting it lightly. I mean, he ended up drafting my son. He actually called me before. He said, "It's okay if I draft your son in Belleville?" And I said, "Sure. It's water under the bridge. Our issue was our issue, and we dealt with it behind the scenes." But yeah, I just think it was more of a personality battle there. He was a young guy, new to the league too. He's done a great job in the OHL, and he was inexperienced and probably a little bit young when he came into the NHL. And I was still fairly young at the time too, to be a captain. I think it was 24, 25 at the time. So, and I think it was just more of a personality conflict, but so yeah, we got into it a bit, and the rest was history. I ended up leaving the next year, going to St. Louis and signed there as a restricted free agent. But it was tough. It was difficult. I'm not going to tell you it wasn't. He and I didn't see eye to eye on some things, and didn't, I didn't want to be, I guess it was probably, I didn't want to be the go-between between him and the players. I'd rather deal with the players on my own. And if I thought there was an issue and they needed to be addressed, I'd address it on my own. I didn't need to be reporting back to anybody else. And that could have been a learning curve for me too, though, because it could probably have been done, but done in the proper way, where nobody was getting, nobody felt like they were getting backstabbed or hurt. And I blame myself for that too, that I was still pretty young and had some growing up to do too. So I think it was just a conflict of our personalities, and they didn't really mesh that great.
Well, we're touching on captaincy there, and Rick, you can chip in on this one too. Is what most people, for the viewers and listeners, what they may want to listen to or hear is that, being a captain is more than just wearing that C, going out there yelling at the referee, and being in the center of the team picture.
Yeah,
there's a lot more that goes along with it. Like maybe both you guys can touch on some of the responsibilities that go with that job that people may not be aware of, that may not be the most glamorous things to be doing when you're trying to discipline a teammate, or anything about a guy not playing well, about a guy not going home on time, and all this kind of stuff.
Well,
Ricky, go ahead.
Yeah, you know what? It's kind of it's difficult when you don't have the backing of your coach. For first and foremost, like, I mean, it's not. I didn't have a problem going to a player and talking to a player if I thought there was an issue of some sort, one way or another. But when your coach, disagrees with you or whatever on something, then it makes it a little bit more difficult to get the respect around the room. And believe me, the players know, your teammates know that if you and the coach have a disagreement going on, they damn well know what's going on. I mean, they hear things.
Yep.
And then it's tough to get their respect. And so, unfortunately, when I was there weren't a whole lot of good coaches we had that could communicate with me as the captain and have my back. And so for me, it was a little bit more difficult in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes you have to make, when you're a leader or a captain, you got to make sometimes the tough decisions you don't really want to make. And I agree with Ricky. Like, that's what I was getting at, is that I had no problem going to talk to a player face to face, and I don't have to berate him or do it in front of anybody. I could go to him and have a one-on-one with him and tell him, something that I thought, and I'd listen to what he had to say too. Maybe I was reading it wrong or seeing it wrong, but it's when your coach, you don't feel comfortable doing some things that coach wants you to do. I mean, I think it's more important that you have your teammates' backs and you stick together as a team, because that's more important, because you're the guys that are going out to battle every night together and on the ice. And I think that's what was kind of, and I think that was George being like maybe a young coach and inexperienced, and me still being pretty young too. So I just didn't feel comfortable doing certain things. I mean, I wanted to deal with things in the way I thought was right, and that was talk to the person or the player face to face. And then it goes back to the old stuff for sure. if you're going to be a leader and want to be a captain, you got to be the hardest working guy in practice. You got to do things that you're going to ask other players. You're going to want to have to do them yourself. And I think that those were the important things. And guys taught me that. And, another guy I'll bring up is Gretz. I had the opportunity to play with him, and he told me, he goes, I don't care what you do off the ice course. He goes, but come to practice and be the hardest working guy in practice. And that's something that always stuck with me. And he also taught me something else is, you have 25, 24 guys. Not all of them will be playing every night. You have trainers and you have coaches, and they're all part of it. If you want to win, they all got to be happy and pulling in the right direction. And he taught me that. He goes, you got to make the fourth line guy feel just as important as the first line guy that's getting 20, 25 minutes and the guy's getting 3 minutes. They all got to feel just as important to the team. And that's something that I learned from him. And that's how I try to treat the young guys coming in. I know a lot of guys, when they see young guys coming in, they're a little bit scared because they think you might lose their job to them or something. But I never looked at it that way. I always looked at it, they're another part of the team and not a part of the puzzle to win. And we got to make them feel part of it. And if somebody goes down injured, they're going to jump in the lineup. So those are the types of things I tried to do as a captain. But I mean, there's just was a conflict. And Ricky said it. You need to have the backing of and the support of your coach, and you have to see things. And that's what I meant by personality conflicts. I think you have to see things similarly. And if you don't, you're going to have a problem. And then I was captain in St. Louis for about 2 months after they took it off of Holly. And then there was a guy named Wayne Gretzky came to town. So I thought it was the right and the honorable thing to do is to give him the C back. He didn't even, but in his defense, in Wayne's, like, the guy's such a class guy. He said to me, no, you keep. And I said, are you kidding me? I'd be embarrassed to be skating around out here with the C on and your number 99 is beside me with the A on. Forget it. I don't want that pressure, I'll tell you. So yeah, it was an honor to wear the C, but Ricky's right. I mean, you got to have the support of the room and the support of the coach, most importantly. And if they see weakness, and it can be a problem.
Well, you're being very nice with Edmonton, because just to give you an idea, I know when you went to St. Louis, they got the rights to Curtis Joseph going back that way. Now here's, an elite goaltender going back there, and they have problems with him. He ends up playing in the minors. They almost moved him to Boston. Then they signed him later. We had him on a couple of weeks ago, and he went through all of this. Yeah. So things were not exactly going smooth in Edmonton to begin with. So there was, and by the way, we're not throwing stones here because we lived through Harold Ballard. So
no, I know.
But was it sort of and you can skate around it as nicely as you can here, but was it as sort of as dysfunctional in Edmonton at that time as it appeared to be from our standpoint?
We went through a few coaches. I mean, Teddy Green was our coach there, and I love Teddy Green. Like, he was incredible to me, incredible as team. He took a blame for all the losses. It wasn't him playing the game. It was us. We were a young bunch of guys, young team, not that experienced. We weren't winning the way we wanted to win. And I think we needed we needed to find our maturity and grow as players, and to have coaches, 2 or 3 coaches come in and out. And then Slats was back behind the bench. Again, going back to that, sometimes you need a little bit of stability and feel good and understand what's going on. And as players and young team, I think it affected us a little bit more. And Slats was always difficult to deal with when it come time to contract time. Right, they didn't have the money that some of the other teams did around the league, so he was always a tough nut on that. And I know when I signed the offer sheet, he called me at the cottage and wasn't too happy with me and told me I treated you like a son and blah blah blah, and was taking care of you. And there was all kinds of offers with it when he was offering me to sign a deal there. And I said to him, I was honest with him. I just look at, I got, this is what I'm going to get from a team. And if you match it in Canadian dollars, because they were offering me, St. Louis was offering me US dollars. And in Canada at the time, we were still making Canadian dollars. And I said, you match it in even Canadian dollars, because I'm living in Canada, I'll be fine with that. And that was a big difference back then. It was 40, 50% back then at the time. But Slats wouldn't budge, and he was a tough negotiator. And it worked out for him, though. Obviously, I went to St. Louis, and I loved playing in St. Louis. And Keenan was a coach that I had in the Canada Cup, and to get to play with Holly and Gretz and all those guys and a great group of guys down there was nice. And they got Cujo back, who's one of my friends now, and I have nothing but respect for him. And I think he's one of the greatest goalies to play and one of the greatest people. So, and Mike Greer went there too. So they did really well in the end. And but yeah, it was a bit of a got a lot of guys leaving and coming and going. It was tough, and coaches too. It makes it a bit of a tough time. And I know Ricky can talk about that. He went through that with the Ballard days and all that kind of stuff. And it's not easy at times, for sure.
Well, that name comes up a lot, and the name you mentioned just before that, Keenan, seemed to come up a lot in these conversations.
Yeah, well, I had both of them. I had one for almost 7 years. It was the biggest pain in the ass was Harold. And then, of course, I get traded to Chicago. Have a good year, 43 goals. Not too shabby, although I did get
that's not too bad.
Yeah. And the next year, Mike Keenan comes in, and I'm not good enough to play. and all I play is power
Yeah.
play. So, everybody has their own. There are different opinions. Every coach you're going to have is different than the other one, and it's not always going to
Yep.
work.
No,
That's the
exactly.
whole point. That's the whole point. Stability at the top starts with management. It works its way down. It's no coincidence the turn in the Toronto Maple Leafs started right with ownership and filtered down with the hiring of Brendan Shanahan and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And you can just go back to where it was and where it is to today, and you can see the differences. And any good organization, any good company starts right at the top. So speaking of which, now you've moved on again. You go back now to where it all started,
Montreal.
So how was all that, and how'd that all come about?
Yeah, well, after I went to St. Louis and played the first year, and like it ended with Gretz and me and Holly playing on a line together. We lost in Game 7 to Detroit. Yzerman, that famous goal scored on Case from outside the blue line. It was a heck of a shot. I'm not blaming Casey. Casey came in and played unbelievable for us after Fuhr got hurt in the Leaf series. But I mean, that was heartbreaking to lose Game 7, double overtime, and then went home in the summer, and we thought we're building something pretty good in St. Louis, and great group of guys. I mean, I can't speak highly enough about the guys I played with in St. Louis. That team was one of the closest teams I've ever played on. And to have Gretz come in at the end of the year was incredible. And to get the opportunity to play with him and be around him and become really, really good friends with him. Because I played with him in the Canada Cup on a line in 91. With him and Larms, actually, Vivey. Larm was one of the most underrated players I've ever played with in my life. Yeah, it was me, Steve Larmer, and Gretz in the Canada Cup. And that guy is one of the most underrated players I've ever played with in my life.
Same thing. Exact same thing.
He's
and
incredible.
I think he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. He was a point guy, but he was so reliable defensively. I mean, I don't know why his name never comes up for the Hall of Fame, because you look at the numbers, he's a point a game. He played, I think, roughly 1,300 games, had 12 or 1,300 points, but he was also a very good defensive player as well.
Yeah, he was incredible. I mean, he was incredible.
That wouldn't be as good as you and me and Fergie when we were out in Halifax. So when the Leafs had camp out there, would it?
Well, Gretz and Larms were pretty good line mates, but I'll tell you what, me and you and Fergie ripped it up in Halifax for a while. I mean, I think we had about 8 goals that night. You had 6 of them, and Fergie had 2, so it was good. We had a good night. I had 8 assists. I'll put an apple on all of those. But yeah, it was fun playing out there with you guys too. I mean, people don't realize I'm not stupid. I know who to get the puck to on that line. We're going to get it to you. You scored 50 goals 3 or 4 times, so I'm not. And Fergie can shoot the puck too, though. Like Fergie, I didn't know Fergie that well until I came to Toronto, and we've played in some alumni together. I mean, that guy is better than I realized he was. Like he's got a lot of talent. He's big and strong, shoot the puck, and he can see the ice well too. So it was a lot of fun playing with you guys. But you were definitely the shooter, and we weren't dumb about that. We were getting you the puck. But I was just going back to Larms. Larms was like Ricky said, the guy was like, I got to play with him that whole training camp, and then because that year they had a training camp. There were 6 of us that went. We had to try out, and I got to play with him the whole training camp, the 2 of them. And Ricky said the guy was just as good defensively as he was offensively. And then he didn't fight, but he didn't have to. He was strong in the puck. Like being tough is not fighting. Like anybody can drop the gloves and fight, but being tough was being strong in the puck, being mentally tough, and being able to play in tough times of the game. Like you could put him out in the ice late in the game for the defensive side or the offensive side. And he was just incredible. And I agree with Ricky 100%. That guy should be in the Hall of Fame. But going back to the trade, I caught us completely off guard. Murray Barron was another St. Louis Blues. Both of us were fan favorites in St. Louis. The team was really tight and close. We had lost Gretz to free agency that summer, which was, kind of sad. And I think they were looking for a centerman. They wanted to get a centerman to replace Gretz, but I never thought it was going to be me or Murray Barron, because Murray Barron was a huge fan's favorite, and we got caught off guard. It was a short time into the season, and you know how Keenan is, Ricky doesn't pull any punches. He walks in the room, he says, "We got to see you." And we knew right then. We came back in the room. I remember coming back in the room was just silent because we were so close and tight. And it was an older team back then, and I'll never forget it. I was like, it kind of made me feel good in a way, because a bunch of guys started crying, and made you feel good. Your teammates loved you that much that they were getting a great player in Turgeon back, and Fitzgerald, and I think it was Conroy, the other guy coming back, and me and Murray Barron were going to Montreal. But that touched me because I got real close to like the guys there, McInnes and Bergevin and McTavish and all those guys that were there. And it just, I mean, it was a nice feeling. And then for Mac T to say they lost the heart and soul of the team when they made the trade, and he wasn't doing anything disrespectful to Terge, because Terge he's a Hall of Fame guy and a hell of a player, and I actually ended up getting to know him, and he's just a super guy too. There's not too many hockey guys that aren't, but it definitely caught us off guard, and we were pretty upset. The two of us, we were in tears. Murray Barron loved St. Louis. I think it was the only place he had been. I had been traded before, but we were definitely caught off guard. But then it was Montreal, and I'm thinking, I love Montreal. I got a lot of friends and family there, so it's one of my favorite cities. So I just don't have to wait for road trips. I can go back and I get to live there again. And I always loved it there. So it was like almost like going home again.
Yeah. Now, what about then? After that, you didn't come back to Toronto.
Yeah.
You, Gary Roberts,
Yep.
and that guy who got traded for you, or the rights to you, Cujo, comes in.
Yeah.
Was it almost feeling like a start over? But walk us through that whole experience of coming back to Toronto. Like you grew up a Toronto Maple Leaf fan. We talk to players all the time about everybody imagines playing in a Maple Leaf uniform.
Yep.
What was that like for you coming back? And then, I mean, was it was it more overwhelming as you expected or less?
Oh, it was definitely very emotional for me. I mean, I had spent 10 years in Montreal, and I got to tell you, they stayed with me. They stood behind me. They loved me in Montreal. They supported me through ups and downs in Montreal, and the city itself was amazing. I mean, but the organization was good to me and stood behind me too. So, I mean, I knew I was becoming an unrestricted free agent for the first time in my career. I was a huge Leafs fan. I always dreamed about playing for the Toronto Maple Leafs. A lot of my idols are Maple Leaf fans, like ex-Maple Leaf players. I mean, I love Bobby Clark and Brian Trottier too, because they played the type of game I love. But I mean, I love the Leafs. Lanny and Darryl and Rick Vive and Turnbull and Palmateer. I was Palmateer when I played road hockey in goal, and Boreas saw me, and I could Earl Thompson. I could go through the whole team. Like, I love, and we loved the Toronto Maple Leafs. So, I mean, to have the opportunity to come back to Toronto and be able to close to my mom, because my dad passed away years ago at 45, and be close to my mom, my two sisters, and my family, and come back here and play for Leafs. I was pretty excited about that. And I mean, I had other offers on the table. Bobby Clark was always a big fan of mine, wanted to draft me in the 84 draft, but a trade with the Maple Leafs fell through. Actually, the 5th pick, he thought he had it, and it fell through. Or I could have been a Philadelphia Flyer a long time ago, but he was trying to sign me in Bruins and a couple of teams. But I mean, I wanted to come back to Toronto, and I seen the team they were building here in Toronto. And you mentioned a couple of guys that they brought in, like Gary Roberts and Cujo, and they already had some great players here. So I thought it was a great fit for me. It was still a difficult decision to leave Montreal after 10 years being there. And it's almost like my second home, but it was an easy decision in the end, because my family was here as a Leaf fan, and to be able to play for that team, put that jersey on, and not only that, they had a great team. They had an opportunity to win every year. So that's something that I wanted. I wanted to win a Stanley Cup. Unfortunately, I never got there. I got there I got there close a few times, and then got to the conference finals a bunch of times, but I wanted to win a cup, and to do it in Toronto would have been amazing. And so it was emotional. Darryl was one of my favorite players growing up, obviously too. To put his jersey on was pretty cool. But just to put that Leaf jersey on, because I love the whole Leaf team and all the players that ever played for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So it was pretty cool, and it was an honor. But there was pressure. I wanted to do well and wanted to play well. And I was already actually having really severe panic attacks and anxiety attacks, and before I got to Toronto, and trying to deal with that on that side too. And then, have so many family and friends around, it was a little bit tougher, but it was all well worth it. I mean, I'm so lucky and blessed to have played for them, because we get to do so many amazing, great things. The alumni, as Rick mentioned, and be able to hang out with the guys, and, with the new ownership and all that, they treat us alumni guys amazingly. And we get to do a lot of fun things because of it. Well,
speaking of family, your sister, for viewers or listeners who aren't aware, your sister's married to one of your close guys, Darcy.
Yeah, that was funny. That was good how that happened.
By the way, he was in Halifax too.
Yeah, but
I'm sure he was.
Yeah, but we were the top line, Ricky. Don't worry, buddy. We were the top line.
Yeah, but no, I mean, nighttime, he was probably your winger.
Oh yeah. Well, he was one of them. He was one of them. I carried him home.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Now, did that weigh in your decision to come and play in Toronto with him in Toronto?
It definitely, family being here definitely weighed on me coming to Toronto. I mean, I have a lot of family in Montreal too. You know, my wife's from Montreal, so I have a lot of family and friends in Montreal too. Some of my best friends are there. But yeah, definitely for sure was part of it. It was nice. My sister would be living in Toronto. My other sister was in Barrie. My mom was in Barrie at the time, so I was close to family. So family and friends definitely played a part of it. And him being here was just an added bonus. But I just liked the team they were putting together, and I always wanted to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I almost ended up here again after when Pat Burns was here coaching, because I was really close with Pat, and he tried to make a trade for me back then, but it didn't go through. But it was just, in the end, it was the place I wanted to be in, and family definitely was part of that decision for sure.
Fantastic. And so what was it, in your estimate, what was it that kept Toronto from getting to that next level? You guys seem to have all the pieces, but what held you guys back, do you think?
Honestly, I think the one year was the injuries we had. I mean, when we lost out, we had a ton of injuries. I think it was Carolina. We had a tough couple series, and a lot of guys were beat up. I think Matt's missed some games. Yeah. Matt's missed some. Yeah, Sundin missed some games. Rob's missed some games. I think Stumpy Thomas missed some games. Tuck's missed some games. I can't think of all of them. But Al McCauley, I tell you what, Al McCauley came in and played unbelievable in that playoff for us because there were so many injuries. He actually ended up being our number one centerman, and he did a hell of a job and played really, really, really well for us. So, you know, we had a deep team. We still almost won that series, but I honestly believe that year was the injuries. If we would have had everybody, Matt's and Rob's and Tuck's and all those guys, I'm probably missing some guys because there was a lot of injury. And the guys that, you know, Ricky knows, he played through with a neck injury and back injury his whole career pretty much. Guys play injured, but sometimes it's impossible to play with the injury that you have. And if you do come back, you're playing at, you know, 50, 60, 70%. I know I had crack in my foot during that series, but everybody plays injured during the playoffs. But there were some guys who were so badly injured they couldn't get to to even 80%. So I believe it was injuries, but every team has injuries. I mean, we got close, but we never did it. And bottom line is we just weren't good enough to win the cup. You got to just face it at that time.
Well,
what was your relationship with?
At that time, I remember.
Go ahead, Rick.
At that time, I remember I was doing Leafs TV, so I was doing the pre and the post game show and covering the team in the playoffs. It was actually a really exciting time for those 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, it was, Ricky.
2 or 3 years. The teams were good every year, making the playoffs, getting to the semifinals or not quite the finals, but good teams. And you're right, there was something that played into it each of those years, like injuries or whatever the case might be. You guys had a team that could have went all the way. It was just something stood in the way, and one thing or another. And most of the time, it was injuries, the key individual.
Exactly, Ricky. I think that you're right. Like every year we had an opportunity if things would have fell into place just right for us to win. But I think the one year when we had all those injuries, when we lost to Carolina, I think that was our best team that they had put together. Deepest team for sure that we had. And if we could have stayed healthy and meaning healthy with the key players, like we lost key players but were big parts of our team if we were going to win. Matt's being one of them, and Rob's was playing great at that time for us too. And Tuxie was doing his thing, and I'm sure there was other injuries on the back end too that were hurting us. So, but yeah, you just didn't get there, and in the end, we weren't good enough. I mean, we weren't good enough to win yet, and there's always.
And one of those years was the health scare of Pat Quinn too, when he was sick and he ended up behind the bench. Remember, he had the heart problems. And what was your relationship with him?
Pat was amazing. I mean, Pat Quinn I have nothing but respect for him, and he's just he's a good person. He's a player's coach, and he can't ask for more. He was just an honest person, and have a lot of respect for him. And he was good to me. And I actually wish that I would have went to him about my anxiety and panic attacks, because I know that he's the type of person would have helped me and would have been somebody that would listen to me and try to do whatever he could to get me on track and feeling better. And that's something I regret, that I wish I would have went to him a little bit earlier. But even then, back then at that time, I was still a little scared to lose my job. I wanted to continue to play, and I was scared to come out and admit weakness. And then now I know that it's not a weakness; it's an illness, and it's a strength to come out with it and admit that you're having a tough time and you need help. And that's the way I look at it now. It makes you a stronger person to do that. And if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't be sitting here, and I'll keep saying it. I wouldn't be sitting here right now. I had a lot of crazy stuff go through my mind, but I wish I would have turned to Pat and been more open with Pat, because I know that he would have been the type of guy that would have been there to help me. Just a good, straightforward, honest person.
Yeah, Pat. You know what? I had a great memory with Pat. Bob Lavelle I can't even remember exactly what it was, but he had some kind of a thing going on at the Americana Hotel down in Niagara Falls, where I live now. And Pat was there. And we sat at a table till 4 o'clock in the morning, just talking about hockey and just other stuff. I mean, it wasn't always hockey. Pat would bring something up and we'd get into, I mean, I don't know how many different topics we covered. But,
Yeah.
I mean, he was a very intelligent man too. I mean, sitting with him till 4 in the morning taught me a hell of a lot about a lot of different things.
Yeah, you're right, Ricky. I remember having a few conversations with him in his office, and he loved the game of hockey. He loved the game of hockey, and he loved hockey players. And he was like I said, that's why I wish I would have opened up to him more. I'm sure that he could have helped me in a lot of different ways. And that's something I do regret. I wish I would have opened up to him and told him more about what was going on in my head. But yeah, he loved to talk, and he was a very, very, very smart person. He could talk about anything. You could put any topic on the table, and he'd talk about whether it was politics or hockey or whatever it was. He had his opinion too. Pat was a strong man. He had his strong opinion and stubborn, and I think that's the Irish in him, right? But yeah, I have the utmost respect for Pat Quinn.
Well, I do too, and he's not a guy I'd want to piss off either, because he was a big man.
No. Oh no, not at all. I seen him mad a few times, trust me, and I was a little scared, but he was a fair man. I mean, you knew where you stood with him, and he was fair. He was fair, and that's all you want to ask from your coaches, and you know that. We all just want somebody to be fair with us, and we can take criticism as long as it's fair criticism, and you're fair about it, and you tell us what you want. Just tell us what you want from us, and we'll go out and do it to play.
Well, the funny part about Pat Quinn, Brian Burke told a story to us one time that after he hit Orr in that famous pit in Boston Garden and the Leafs got smoked, everybody wondered what happened after. And apparently he went out for a few beers after with a few buddies. So as the story goes, he went to the Fours, which was across the street or whatever it was called at the time. I think it was called the Fours. And he went in the bar. And so, but the fans were all sort of congratulating him on the hit. And and whoever's with him at the time said, "You look like you're pissed off." And he goes, "Well, I thought I was going to get in some fights here. I was ready to go."
Oh, Pat was ready to go at a drop of a hat. Trust me, being coached by him, you could see him. He was ticked off with some of the players on the other team a few times, and he wouldn't back down at all, man. He was, and that look, like Ricky said, he's a big man, big paws. And if he got that look in his eye, you knew, don't say anything, be quiet and let it pass. But yeah, he was nails, and that doesn't surprise me at all.
Now on a later, we want to thank you so much for doing those. We've got a couple minutes left with you, Shayne. Pranks always come up as part of hockey, and we always get asked the question, who's one of the biggest pranksters you ever play with?
Oh, Mark Bergevin. Mark Bergevin, the GM in Montreal. He is one of the biggest pranksters I've ever played with in my entire, never mind hockey.
One of his best.
Oh God.
They talk about him dressing up in costumes and everything.
That's what I was going to tell you. Okay. We're over in the World Championships in Europe, playing the World Championships. And, we had two different dressing rooms. We had one where we took our clothes off, and then there was just a curtain put up at the doorway to where we'd go in to put our hockey gear on. We're all sitting in there, and the music box for some reason was in where we put our clothes on, not in the dressing room where we're putting our hockey gear on, because there was two smaller rooms. I think actually a couple of guys even had to dress in the smaller room where we took our clothes off. All of a sudden we hear this music come on, and Bergie's, French Canadian, and all of a sudden we hear this loud music come on, and out comes Bergie from behind the curtain, and he has his inner jock on, some socks and his garter belt, and dancing around the room. And there he goes. Welcome to the stage, Roxanne. And he's just not only prankster, probably one of the best team guys I've ever played with, and one of the best guys in the room. He knew how to keep guys loose, but then he knew when to turn it off too. Sometimes if you have a jokester and he's just doing pranks and joking around constantly, it can start to get on your nerves or annoy you a bit. But he just knew when to push buttons. He knew when to have fun and joke around and maybe play a prank because that was needed at the time. But then he knew when to turn it off and not be that guy and just be more serious. And I think that's why he's been such a great teammate, such a leader anywhere he's played. And now I think he's done a super job there in Montreal. They've seemed to turn the corner there. So yeah, there's so many things that he's pulled off, but it's just different. You know, he loved to dress up in costume and he'd have his glasses on sideways. It's just, the stuff he used to do was just the funniest stuff I've ever seen. And I mean, he just made it's so much fun to come to the rink every day. And anybody you talk to play with Marc Bergevin will tell you the same thing.
Yeah, I played with
Ricky?
him. I played with him.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, now, and
Well, we were
the funny part in Buffalo, I believe it was, or Chicago. I can't remember now. But
Chicago.
It was probably Chicago.
I played with him in Chicago.
Yeah, and I mean, the guy he was a good player too, but you know what? You're right. He was just doing it at the right time when it was needed to loosen the guys up or whatever. And but back then, I mean, you're thinking to yourself like I mean, when you look back now, and he's the general manager of the Montreal Canadiens.
Oh yeah.
You know, I would have said, not a chance. There's no way he would ever be a general manager in a National Hockey League.
Ricky, he was my roommate in St. Louis when we were on the road. So yeah, when he got named general manager of Montreal, I started laughing. He sent me a text message. He sent me a text message, and he sends me pretty funny text messages anyways. When we're alone one time, all of us, I'll tell you a couple stories. But he was like fifth, sixth defenseman, but he just made up for it on his leadership and the way to keep the guys happy and keep them playing at the best level they possibly could. And you're right. He was just, but I mean, I realized that he kind of worked his way through different organizations to learn that side of it. So once I looked into what he had done after his career, I realized that, you know, it wasn't as big a surprise as I would have thought when I first noticed Marc Bergevin's the GM of the Montreal Canadiens and the Montreal Canadiens. But he's doing a good job, and I'm happy for him. He's still a good friend of mine. I still talk to him, and he's the funniest player I've ever played with, period.
Well, we always like to hear guys do well. We just don't want him to do too well at that hockey.
Yeah, that's right. He can win all the other games, but lose to Toronto.
Yeah, we'd be quite happy with that, Shayne. That'd work out. Now, just a couple more questions here before we go. The most intense player you ever played with?
Oh, there's so many of them. Like, hockey players are very intense to begin with, but
somebody the fans may not think of. He would come.
Mark Messier is the obvious one, but I mean, because I played with him in the Canada Cup, but I didn't play with him a long period. But I'll tell you, Chris Chelios was one intense hockey player, right? But he was intense, but he was calm. He was relaxed and laid back there. Claude Lemieux was very intense, on and off the ice. He would drive us nuts in the dressing room. Never mind anybody on the ice. So Claude Lemieux would be one of the most intense guys I played with for sure, on and off the ice. Chelly was intense in a different way. Chelly, you'd look back and you think he was sitting in a rocking chair playing the game. He seemed so calm when he played the game, made the right play and the easy play. But he was intense. Like, he loved to win and compete. And Claude Lemieux was one. And I got to give a shout out to my brother-in-law. He's pretty intense. He'd be mad at me if I didn't say Darcy Tucker was an intense guy. Right? I got to give him a little shout out. But I mean,
That's the Ottawa Senators.
Yeah, exactly. Chelly and Claude Lemieux are two of them that I played with were very intense hockey players for sure.
Shelley was a dirty bugger too, boy. I'll tell
you. Oh my God. I learned it from him, Ricky. He taught me how to slash guys in the back of the knee and cross check you in the back and all that stuff. He had me doing all that kind of stuff. He had me wound up all the time.
Well, when I was in Buffalo, we played Montreal in a 6-game series, or maybe 7. I had to stand in front of the net between him and Ludwig on the other side.
Ludwig.
And it was just taking turns, cross-checking me, whacking me. And meanwhile, Patrick was whacking me in the back of the leg at the same time. Like, it was pretty crazy.
Oh, yeah.
When you played against those two guys.
Ricky, you're right. I'll never forget those two playing together, because what it was is Ludsey would give you a cross check across the. They had a plan. You wouldn't believe. Like the old days, they had this stuff planned. Like, we would sit in the dressing room going through who we had to do what to and who were fighters, what hand they were. You know how it worked with all these guys, right? So Ludsey would say, "Okay, I'm going to cross check him." So Ludsey would cross check you, put you off your balance, so you'd be kind of falling forward or something, right? And then all of a sudden you get a chop on the back of the knee from Chelly on the back of the knee with his stick, and then Patrick would be there trying to trip you. They had a plan. They knew what they were doing. They were dirty, both of them, like really dirty. But the two of them, I'll tell you right now, the two of them were great teammates. And Chelly was one of my best teammates and one of my best buddies during our playing days. And we're still good friends. We still talk. But I got to give Chelly credit. Whenever I was involved in a skirmish or something, he wasn't he would be right there for me. He wasn't necessarily would fight, but he would be right there to grab a guy's arm and just try to make sure. Because, in the old days, everybody kind of would pile in there, and then the tough teams would have 4 or 5 guys in on there. So he was a great teammate. I mean, I know he was dirty, and we all were kind of taught. That's how we were taught by these guys. And yeah, looking back, we were really bad sometimes. I just think, like, wow, why was I chopping Paul Coffey all the way up the ice on the ankle?
Well, Chili had to look after you, Shayne.
Yeah.
Chili had to look after you because he had to go out with somebody after the games were over.
There you are, buddy. We were like, that's what he loved me. He grabbed me right away. He goes, "Hey, you're with me, kid." And I wasn't arguing with him.
Okay, so final question here for you. We go through this, everybody coming in. This version of the Maple Leafs, what do you think?
I mean, I think they got a lot of skill. I mean, the game's changed over the years from when Ricky came in to when I even got there. And then when I was leaving the game had changed a lot. I mean, they got such good skill and speed and stuff like that. But I mean, I think Ricky and I being former players and being through it and through the grind, I think there's one thing they got to learn. They got to learn how to win when it's important. And I think to do that, you got to have good goaltending. You got to be able to play in your own zone. And obviously you have to put the puck in that. Don't get me wrong. You want to win hockey games, you got to score goals. So and I believe they can do that. I think they have that type of team where they can put the offensive side of it up, and they've shown that, with the type of players they have. They just have to put it together. And I mean, time will tell here. We got to pick up a couple of defensemen, I think, that are, playing well. Maybe one kid that's been there and is playing better this year. And then they picked up the kid from Calgary there. I think he's, starting to come around, maybe a little bit nervous at the start, but I just find they have to find a way to win the playoffs, and Ricky knows it. The game, I don't care what anybody tells you, the game changes from regular season to playoff time, and it's a bit more of a grind, and you got to be able to fight through them, battle through that, and score goals in the tough areas too, and do the job in the defensive zone. And I think that's where they got to tighten up a little bit, is maybe in the defensive zone a bit, because they can score goals, but they have to learn to score the tough goals. And the guys that scored consistently over the years, 40, 50 goals, they'll tell you themselves it wasn't all pretty goals. They went to the dirty zones and dirty areas and paid the price to score those goals too, by standing in front of the net, like Ricky said, or going in and banging home a rebound. So I think they can score the pretty ones. They got to learn how to score the dirty ones, and they got to learn how to fight through a bit tougher checking hockey games. That's my opinion.
Final thought, Rick?
Well, I think I agree. I think regular season, no doubt in my mind, they're probably one, if they're not the best, they're one of the best teams in the league. They got so much talent. I think this year they have more depth up front than they ever had, even on defense as well. And but I think you're right, Shayne. I mean, it comes down to playoffs. Everybody knows you can do whatever the heck you want in the regular season, but playoffs, the game is completely different. And it's 4 years in a row that haven't gotten by the first round. And that's the next step. It's not something that happens overnight. It's like, okay, get by the first round, maybe then you win the second round. Now you're in the semifinals, and then the next year you do a little bit more, or you get to the semifinals again, and then once you get to the finals, man, you got to take advantage of it, because it's not every day that you get to the Stanley Cup Finals. And but again, it's a process, and I know people are sick and tired of hearing that, but it really is. And this team's been through a lot in the last 4 years. It's time now that they need to learn how to win. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ricky. I think it's a learning process for sure. And it's just hopefully, like you said, they've been through a lot over the last 4 years. And like you said, I think it's time for them to take that next step, because hopefully they've learned from different things that have happened to them over the last 4 years. So hopefully they do take that next step. And you're right. I mean, I look back I've been to the semifinals, the conference finals a few times. I've been to the finals once hurt, and then the other time I played in it. And when you're early on in your career, you think it's going to happen all the time. And then you realize I got there once over like 18 or 17 or 18 years or 19 years, whatever it was. And you're so right. You got to, when you get there, boy, you got to do whatever you can to make it happen, and make it work and win it, because it's not an easy thing to get to. But I agree. I like their team. I think they're deeper for sure up front, and on the defense. I think they're a little bit, everybody says bigger and stronger. I mean, I just think they have the type of players that can play that style a bit better in the playoffs. And what I mean by the guys that scored 40, 50 goals consistently, Yeah, a little grittier. But the guys that scored the 40 goals, 50 goals consistently, they know how to get the dirty goals, and that's what you get in the playoffs a lot of times. And those guys are going to score goals in the playoffs too. But you get these guys that score like 30 to 35. Still a great regular season, but they got to find a way to get the dirty goals in the playoffs. And that's the difference between a 30 and a 50 goal scorer, right? And then if you get a 20 goal scorer and you get a guy that does that year in, year out, but still plays really well on the defensive side, those are the types of players you love. So you got to get those guys that are doing the 25 to 30 to buy into every part of the game and then find those dirty goals. And I think they can do it. They just got to find a way to win. As you said, it's a process.
Well, the process seems to be taking hold right now. They're 6-2 and a couple coming up with Edmonton as we record this today. So we'll see how it all goes. And of course, we want to thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. Great listening to you. Some great stories. It's always a treat. We'll run into you again, I'm sure, over when things are safe again, I'm sure.
Exactly.
And we just want to thank you again so much for joining us today.
I really appreciate coming on with you guys. And anytime you want me on, I'd be more than happy to come on with you guys. I love talking about life and hockey. And at the same time, if we can help somebody, get through a tough time, that's the most important thing. So I really appreciate you guys giving me this platform to do that. And to everybody that's out there fighting COVID, thank you so much for all the things you're doing out there. It's incredible to put your lives on the line to help us and keep us safe.
Well, another great guest we had today with us, Squid, Shayne Corson. He's one of those guys, you see him in a bar out there. He's the one guy you want to hang around with because he's got a million stories, loves telling the stories, life of the party guy. But when we listen to him in a forum like this, he can be very serious. He's very articulate. He has a very good opinion, and he's very serious about what he's dealing with for most of his life with anxiety. And he's willing to reach out and help people. And how can you not like a guy like that?
Absolutely. Shayne's a great guy and loves to have fun. And I remember one time we did go to Florida and with corporate partners, him and Al were with the Molson guys and I was with a different group. And we all met up at the same bar after the game. And I sat there at that bar until about 4:00 in the morning with Shayne and Al after everybody else had left. And I mean, I don't even have a drop of alcohol in me, but I was so entertained by those two guys. It was incredible. It was so much fun. I really enjoyed it.
Well, as I said, I ran into him a few times on my excursion, and I remember watching him in Nashville, and he's waving at me from we're on the roof of Tootsie's, which is the famous bar right across from Bridgestone Arena, and he had the audience around him. It was just like unbelievable, like the second coming, and they were just hanging on every word, and he's laughing and screaming, and it was the best. So, and as we told folks, you get a chance to have a pint with Mr. Corson, enjoy it, because he's a great, great guy. And we're going to get Darcy on in the next little while also. So we'll speak with him and we'll trade some stories.
His version of some things.
We'll get his version of some of the stories also from that. And speaking of which, next week we're excited to bring, we'll let you go. We're going to have Phil Esposito joining us. And so that should be rather entertaining as we go back through Phil's career playing with Chicago, and obviously one of the biggest, probably misguided trades, or probably one-sided trades, with him going to Boston in the era and then turning into the player that he did. And his 72 series and the Summit Series, we're going to go through that and what he did after and what he's doing right up in today. So we're looking forward to having Phil on. As usual, my winger and I, Ricky, another good day. You can pick us up on Squid and the Ultimate Leaf Fan on our page we have now, Squid and the Ultimate Leaf Fan. We're on Twitter under Mike Wilson, the Ultimate Leaf Fan, or the Ultimate Leaf Fan, Rick5 on Instagram or on Twitter. Watch for us. Continue. We didn't get a chance to ask a question today, but if you want to DM us or send one of us a question, we'll ask it. We got Phil on next week. So if you want to throw a couple questions at Phil, we'll see if we can get one or two on the air next week with Phil. And other than that, anything closing off here, Rick?
Well, we're looking forward to getting Phil on. That was great today to have Shayne on. Also, the one thing too that, I guess the older generation would know, but Phil was, one of the main factors in bringing the Tampa Bay Lightning into the National Hockey League as well. So that's another thing that we can talk with him about. And I mean, the guy was a natural goal scorer and played for the big bad Bruins, won what, 2 cups, I believe, with the Bruins, I think.
Yeah.
With Bobby Orr. So it should be good.
It's going to be fun. So, guys, listen, again, look for Squid and the Ultimate Leaf Fan on all your social artworks. And we're looking forward to speaking again next week.